Dr. Kim Minji felt the cold bite of alien air as she stepped onto the strange world of Zarian Prime. The ground beneath her boots was made of crystal that sparkled like diamonds. She was so small that the other humans in her group looked like giants next to her. At barely 4 feet and 8 inches tall, she knew she would look like a child to these alien beings. But Minji was not a child. She was Earth's best scientist, who studied alien life. She had spent years learning about the creatures that lived among the stars. Today, she would meet them face to face for the first time. The aliens were waiting for her. They stood in a perfect circle, and each one was bigger than any human she had ever seen. High Chancellor Vexter was the tallest. His body was covered in black shell-like armor that shined in the orange light of this world's sun. He had 4 arms, and his face looked like a giant insect with sharp teeth that clicked when he moved his mouth. Behind Vextar stood the other alien leaders. The Luminari looked like people made of pure light. Their bodies glowed white and blue, and Minji had to squint to look at them directly. The Terrans were living rocks that moved like mountains walking. Their eyes were red gems that burned like fire. The Nephilim had wet, slippery skin and breathed through gills on their necks. All of them were huge. All of them looked down at her, like she was an ant. Commander Park Hunwoo walked behind Minji. He was her guard and friend. She could feel him getting angry as the aliens stared at her, but she stayed calm. She had expected this. She had prepared for this moment her whole life. Vextar made a sound like breaking glass. The other humans later learned this was how his people laughed. So this is what Earth sends to us, he said in perfect English, though his voice sounded like metal scraping against stone. A baby creature that cannot even reach our feet. The other aliens made their own laughing sounds. Some buzzed like giant bees. Others made deep rumbling noises like earthquakes. The luminaries' laughter sounded like wind chimes in a storm. We hoped to meet our equals today, said another Zerathi official. His shell was blue instead of black. Instead, we meet insects. Minji did not move. She did not speak. She simply held her small tablet computer and recorded everything. Every word, every insult, every cruel laugh. She would remember all of this. The meeting that followed was not really a meeting at all. It was a show. The aliens had already decided what they would do before Minji ever arrived. They did not want humans to join their group as equals. They would only let humans serve them like slaves. Earth will pay us money and give us materials, Vextar announced. In return, we will protect you from dangers in space. You will have no voice in our decisions. You will do as we command. The other alien leaders nodded their massive heads. They had ruled this part of the galaxy for thousands of years. To them, humans were just another weak species to control. Minji's own people were shocked. Commander Park wanted to argue. The other human diplomats wanted to walk away in anger. But Minji raised her small hand, and they all became quiet. We understand your position, she said. Her voice was soft but clear. Even the giant aliens could hear every word. Humanity will think about your kind offer. Her calm response surprised everyone. The aliens expected anger or fear. The humans expected her to fight back with words. Instead, she accepted the insult with perfect grace. As the ceremony ended, something strange happened. Minji watched the alien faces carefully. Behind all their pride and cruelty, she saw something else. Fear. They were afraid of something, and she did not yet know what. The aliens mocked humans because they were small and weak. But there was something about humanity that worried them. Something they could not understand or control. Vextar dismissed the humans like unwanted guests. Return to your little world, he said. Send us your answers soon. We have more important matters to handle. But as Minji walked back to her ship, she smiled a tiny smile. She had learned something very valuable today. The most powerful beings in the galaxy were afraid of the smallest human in the room. She did not know why yet, but she would find out. The crystal ground crunched under her boots as she left the meeting place. Behind her, the aliens continued their cruel laughter. They thought they had won. They thought they had put humanity in its proper place. They had no idea that they had just made the biggest mistake of their very long lives. Minji clutched her tablet tighter. Everything was recorded. Everything was saved. And soon, she would use their own words against them. The smallest human had just lit a fuse that would burn down their entire world. 3 months had passed since the aliens laughed at Dr. Kim Mingi. She had stayed on their crystal world, watching and learning. Every day, she walked through their cities and listened to their talk. The aliens still treated her like a pet or a curious toy. They did not think humans were smart enough to understand their important business. Minji was fine with this. While they ignored her, she learned their secrets. Then everything changed. The emergency alarms started screaming at dawn. Red lights flashed through the crystal buildings. Minji had never heard such terrible sounds before. She ran to the Great Council chamber, where all the alien leaders were gathering. Hi. Chancellor Vexstar stood at the center of the room. His black shell was dull now, not shiny like before. His 4 arms shook as he spoke. The Outer Edge colonies have stopped talking to us, he said. His voice cracked like breaking stone. 7 whole star systems in the Calarian area. They are all gone. A giant screen appeared in the air above them. It showed a map of space with bright dots for each star system. But where 7 dots should have been, there was only empty black space. Not even tiny pieces were left behind. Lieutenant Colonel Lee Jinwoo had arrived from Earth that morning. He was carrying secret reports in a locked case. He sat down next to Minji and whispered in her ear, "The Devourers," he said so quietly that only she could hear. "Our space watchers saw their energy marks weeks ago. We tried to warn everyone, but nobody listened." Minji nodded. She had read about the Devourers in old Earth books. They were like a swarm of space locusts that ate everything in their path. Most people thought they were just scary stories. The alien leaders began shouting at each other. Each species wanted to handle the problem their own way. The Zerathi wanted to send their biggest warships. These ships were so powerful they could break apart whole planets. "We will crush them with pure force," roared Vexstar. "Nothing can stand against our annihilation fleet." The Luminari beings of light had a different idea. They wanted to use their power over star energy to burn the enemies away. "We shall turn the very suns against them," sang their leader in a voice like music. The rock people called Terrans wanted to build giant battle stations the size of moons. These would be armed with weapons that could destroy solar systems. Stone Endures rumbled, their chief. "We will build walls in space that nothing can pass." Each alien group was sure their way was the best way. They did not ask the small human sitting quietly in the corner what she thought. One by one, they tried their plans. One by one, they failed. The Zerathi sent their great war fleet to fight the Devourers. The ships were huge and carried enough weapons to level continents. But when they met the enemy, something horrible happened. The Devourers did not just destroy the ships. They ate them. They learned from them. They became stronger. The Luminari tried next. They gathered their energy masters and focused the power of 3 different suns into a beam of pure destruction. The beam hit the Devourer swarm and seemed to work at first. But then the creatures began to glow. They had absorbed the star energy and were using it to grow bigger and faster. The Terrans built their moon-sized battle station in record time. It was covered in the strongest weapons ever made. When the Devourers arrived, the station fired everything it had. The space around it lit up like 1,000 fireworks shows. But when the light faded, the station was gone. The Devourers had turned its own weapons against it. Each time the aliens tried to fight, the enemy learned something new. The Devourers were not just hungry monsters. They were smart. They studied each attack and found ways to use it against the next victims. News of failure after failure came flooding back to Zarian Prime. The proud alien leaders began to panic. Their mighty fleets were being destroyed. Their colonies were disappearing. Nothing they tried worked. That was when Vexstar came to see Minji alone. The great alien leader could barely look at her. His shell had turned gray with fear. His forearms hung limp at his sides. "We need your people to help us," he said, but his words were lies wrapped in pretty paper. Minji sat perfectly still and listened. Vexstar explained that humans would have the great honor of being advanced scouts. They would go first into battle against the Devourers. They would test the enemy and find their weak spots. Everyone in the room knew what this really meant. The aliens wanted humans to die first so they could learn how to fight better. "Your small ships will be perfect for scouting missions," Vexstar continued. "It will be a glorious sacrifice for the greater good." When he finished talking, Minji looked up at him with her dark eyes. "I understand," she said in her quiet voice. "This is an order, not a request." "The hegemony has made its decision," Vex replied. For the first time since arriving on this world of crystal and mockery, Dr. Kim Minji smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had been waiting for exactly this moment. The aliens had just made their second, terrible mistake. The word came out of Dr. Kim Minji's mouth like a sharp knife cutting through silk. No. The Great Council chamber became so quiet that everyone could hear their own breathing. "High Chancellor," Vexstar's insect-like mouthparts clicked together in shock. His forearms froze in the middle of gesturing. "You refuse?" he asked. The words came out slow and confused, like he was trying to understand a language he had never heard before. Minji stood in the center of the huge room. Around her, the 7 most powerful alien species in the galaxy stared down at her tiny human form. Any one of them could have crushed her with a single hand, but none of them could understand what was happening. "I decline your kind offer," Minji said in her calm, quiet voice. She pulled out a small device from her pocket and pressed a button. Suddenly, the air above her head filled with pictures and numbers that glowed like colored smoke. The aliens gasped. The information floating in the air showed things they had never seen before. Charts about how the Devourers moved and fought. Energy readings that explained how they learned. Battle plans that showed exactly why every alien attack had failed. "You have been doing everything wrong," Minji explained. Her voice was still soft, but now it carried the power of someone who knew secrets that others did not. "You fight these creatures like they are normal enemies. They are not normal. They are like a giant brain that eats knowledge and gets smarter with every battle." She pointed to the glowing pictures above her head. Each one showed how the alien races had failed. The Zarathi had used brute force, just like they always did. The Luminari had used energy weapons, just like they always did. The Terrans had built big fortresses, just like they always did. "Every smart species in this galaxy thinks the same way," Minji continued. "You all follow the same patterns. You all make the same choices. That is exactly what the Devourers expected. That is why they won so easily." Captain Osunghun stepped forward from the small group of humans. He was tall and strong, but even he looked tiny next to the alien giants. "Dr. Kim has found a way to beat them," he announced. "But it will only work if you follow human battle plans instead of your own." The reaction was immediate and explosive. The aliens began making angry noises that filled the chamber like a thunderstorm. The Zarathi clicked their mandibles so fast it sounded like machine guns. The Luminari buzzed, with light that hurt to look at. The Terrans rumbled like earthquakes. The water-breathing Nephilim made gurgling shrieks. The idea of following human strategies was more insulting to them than the idea of dying. But Minji was not finished talking. "Also," she said, and her calm voice cut through all the alien noise, like a sword through paper. "Earth's escape ships are already moving to the edge of the galaxy. We have been getting ready to leave since this crisis started." Now the chamber became quiet again, but it was a different kind of quiet. It was the quiet of fear. Vexter's shell turned from black to dark gray. You would run away and leave us here to die. We would live, Minji replied simply. Just like you could live, if you are willing to put aside your pride and listen to the smallest person in this room. She let her words hang in the air like smoke. The meaning was clear to everyone. The mighty hegemony, the rulers of 1,000 worlds, had only two choices. They could follow the tiny humans they had laughed at, or they could face the alone and die. The alien leaders looked at each other with expressions of shock and growing fear. For thousands of years, they had been the strongest beings in space. They had conquered planets and enslaved entire species. They had never needed to ask anyone for help. Now their survival depended on creatures they considered to be insects. Vexter tried one more time to sound powerful and threatening. If you abandon us, we will remember. When this crisis is over, there will be consequences for humanity. Minji smiled for the second time since coming to this world. It was not a cruel smile, but it was not kind either. It was the smile of someone who held all the important cards in a deadly game. Chancellor, she said gently, if we leave, there will be no after the crisis. There will be no hegemony left to remember anything. The Devourers will eat everything you have built, and then they will spread to other parts of the galaxy. She paused and looked around the room at each alien face. But if you choose to work with us, if you choose to trust us, then maybe we can all survive together. Maybe we can even win. The chamber fell silent again. Outside the crystal windows, the orange sun of Zarian Prime was setting. Soon it would be dark, and everyone would have to make their choice. The most powerful beings in the galaxy sat in their tall chairs and stared down at the smallest human they had ever seen. She had just told them that their only hope of survival was to follow her lead. The terrible part was that they all knew she was right. The decision is yours, Minji said quietly. And then she waited. The orange sun was just coming up over the crystal mountains when the final battle began. Dr. Kim Minji stood in the center of the war room, surrounded by floating screens that showed ships and stars. The pictures moved and changed like a giant puzzle made of light. This was the biggest space battle anyone had ever seen. Ships from 8 different species were working together for the first time. Next to her, Admiral Choi Min was talking quickly into his headset. He was telling the human ships where to go and what to do. All around them, alien commanders were trying to learn new ways of fighting. They looked confused and worried. Lieutenant Yoon Soo-jin sat at a control desk, covered in blinking lights. She looked up at Minji with serious eyes. The Devourer swarm is coming into our star system, she reported. They will be here in 6 hours. Minji nodded. Everything was going exactly as she had planned. The plan was crazy, but it was also simple. Instead of meeting the Devourers head-on, with all their weapons blazing, they were going to pretend to be scared and run away. They would leave behind ships that looked broken and helpless. They would make it seem like people were panicking and had no idea what to do. Remember everyone, Minji said into her microphone so all the ships could hear her. These creatures have learned how to beat every normal way of fighting. So we are going to fight in a way that is completely not normal. The human ships were the smallest ones in the big fleet. Next to the alien warships, they looked like tiny bugs flying around elephants. But the human ships moved together like birds in a flock. When one ship turned left, they all turned left. When one ship sped up, they all sped up. It was like watching a dance in space. The alien ships were different. Each one fought like it was alone. The Zarathi ships were huge and powerful, but they did not work well with others. The Luminari ships were fast and bright, but they only cared about showing off their own strength. The Terran ships were slow, but tough, like flying fortresses that trusted no one else. Watching the humans work together made the aliens feel amazed and confused at the same time. When the Devourers finally arrived, they saw exactly what they expected to see. The defending ships looked scared and disorganized. Some ships seemed to be running away as fast as they could. Others appeared to be broken and drifting helplessly in space. The space stations looked like they were falling apart. Radio messages between the defenders sounded panicked and hopeless. The Devourers had seen this pattern many times before. Every species they had fought started brave and ended up terrified. The creatures swarmed forward eagerly, heading for what looked like easy targets. But Minji was watching everything from her command center. She waited until the Devourers were in exactly the right position. Then she leaned forward and whispered one word. Now. Suddenly, everything changed. Ships that had been hiding behind asteroids came roaring out with their weapons ready. Vessels that had been pretending to run away spun around and opened fire. The broken space stations revealed powerful guns that had been hidden inside their hulls. But the most important thing was that nothing the defenders did was predictable. The Devourers had learned to expect certain moves, but the humans kept doing things that made no sense according to normal military rules. Human fighters would fly straight at much bigger enemy ships, then suddenly scatter in 12 different directions. Large alien warships would pretend to retreat, then use their massive guns to create walls of fire that trapped the Devourers in killing zones. Support ships would suddenly become attack ships, and attack ships would suddenly start rescuing damaged vessels. High Chancellor Vextar watched from his command ship as the battle unfolded. His 4 eyes could barely follow what was happening. The tiny human ships seemed to be giving orders to his giant warships. Somehow, the smallest vessels in the fleet were directing the largest ones, turning raw alien power into surgical precision strikes. How are they doing this? He asked his tactical officer, a young Zerthi with bright green shell markings. The answer came through the radio from Colonel Park Sunwoo, who was commanding a group of human fighters. "We are persistence hunters," Chancellor Park explained, while his ship dodged enemy fire. "We never give up, and we do not think like anyone else in the galaxy." Vextar watched as human ships that should have been destroyed kept fighting with damaged engines and broken weapons. He saw alien crews following human battle plans that seemed insane but somehow worked perfectly. Most importantly, he saw the Devourers making mistakes for the first time. The enemy creatures were confused. They had learned to counter every type of military strategy used by advanced civilizations. But humans were not fighting like an advanced civilization. They were fighting like the scrappy survivors of a dangerous world, using tricks and tactics that no computer could predict. As the last Devourer ship exploded in a ball of fire and metal, High Chancellor Vextar finally understood his mistake. He had judged humans by their size and strength. But the most important measurement was not how big they were, it was how they thought. And humans thought like no one else in the galaxy. The Great Council Chamber had never been this quiet before. Not even when the most important alien leaders made their biggest speeches. The silence was so deep that Dr. Kim Minji could hear her own heartbeat as she stood in the exact same spot where the aliens had laughed at her 6 months ago. But everything was different now. The mighty hegemony fleet was destroyed. Half of their space stations were gone. Their proud colonies lay in ruins across dozens of star systems. Only the clever fighting plans of the tiny human woman had saved them all from being completely wiped out by the Devourers. Minji looked around the room at the alien faces. High Chancellor Vextar's black shell was covered in scars from the final battle. His 4 arms hung at his sides like broken tree branches. The other alien leaders looked just as beaten and tired. Their eyes no longer held the cruel pride that had once made them mock her size. "The old way of doing things is dead," Minji said in her quiet voice that somehow filled the entire chamber. "Now we must decide what to build in its place." Vex opened his mouth to speak, but no words came out at first. He had been the most powerful being in the galaxy for over 100 years. Now he struggled to find simple words like a child learning to talk. "What do you want from us?" he finally managed to ask. "Partnership," Minji replied, without hesitation. Real partnership. Not the fake kind, where you pretend to be our friends, while treating us like servants. I want humans to have equal voices in a new galactic council. She paused and looked directly at each alien leader. Her small body somehow commanded the attention of beings who were 10 times her size. Humanity will help you rebuild everything that was lost, she continued. But we will do this as equals, not as your servants or pets. The alien representatives looked at each other with expressions of defeat and worry. They all knew they had no choice. Without human help, their civilizations would collapse. Without human military strategies, the next crisis would destroy them all. There will be rules, Minji said, and now her voice carried the authority of someone who held all the power in the room. From now on, all military operations will use human tactical methods. All member worlds must follow Earth's emergency evacuation plans. And when we make important decisions, the species that contributes the most will have the strongest voice. Major Kong Minjae stepped forward from the small group of humans. He pressed buttons on a control device, and suddenly the air above, everyone's heads filled with glowing charts and diagrams. The pictures showed a new government structure, where humans would not just be members of the galactic community, they would be its leaders. The aliens stared at the floating images with growing understanding and fear. The species they had once called insects were now going to tell them what to do. As the meeting ended, the alien leaders filed out of the chamber with slow, heavy steps. They looked like prisoners walking to their cells. But Vexstar stayed behind. He approached Minji with careful, respectful movements. I need to say something to you, Dr. Kim, he said, and his voice was different now. Gone was the cruel laughter. In mocking tone, I owe you an apology. We judged your people by the wrong things. Minji looked up at the giant alien who had once compared her to a baby insect. She smiled the same small, knowing smile she had worn during those first terrible meetings. Size and strength do matter, Chancellor, she replied, but not in the way you thought they did. She picked up her tablet and notes from the table. Captain Im Do-yeon was waiting for her at the chamber doors. He would escort her to the transport ship that would take her back to Earth. She had been away from home for almost a year, but now she could finally return as a hero. Behind her, the former masters of the galaxy began to understand what their new lives would be like. They would have to learn humility from the same species they had once called insects. They would have to ask for permission from creatures they had once dismissed as worthless pets. As Mingi walked toward the exit, she thought about how strange life could be. 6 months ago, she had been the smallest and weakest person in this room. The aliens had laughed at her size and mocked her quiet voice. They had offered humanity only the choice to serve or be destroyed. Now those same aliens would rebuild their entire civilization, according to her plans and her vision. The crystal doors of the council chamber closed behind her with a soft chime. Outside, her transport ship was warming its engines. Soon she would lift off from the surface of Zarian Prime and return to Earth, with news that would change human history forever. As the ship rose into the orange sky, Minji looked down at the crystal cities below. She thought about an old Earth saying, sometimes the smallest person in the room doesn't just survive the fire. They control who gets burned. The hegemony had mocked humanity's smallest representative. Now they would spend the rest of their lives following her rules. The tiny human had won everything.